Hello and welcome to Greensboro's J. Douglas Galyon Depot. Today we are going to be riding east with North Carolina's Piedmont service, Amtrak's most unique intercity rail service. Greensboro's Galyon Depot was built in 1927 as the Greensboro Southern Railway Depot, a railway name still proudly displayed above the main entrance. Southern Railway operated trains in and out of Greensboro until 1979, wherein the station fell into a state of disrepair. Efforts to restore passenger service to the station began in the early 90s, with building renovations taking place in the early 2000s. The station reopened to the public on October 1st of 2005, with trains running ever since. The station now serves Amtrak's Crescent and Carolinian long-distance routes and the North Carolina state-sponsored Piedmont service, which we'll be riding on today. Making our way inside, we're met with a gorgeous station. The 2.5-story tall main waiting hall is the real centerpiece of the station, with arched windows, gold accents, and chandeliers every few feet. The waiting area takes up the west side of the station and includes plenty of benches for waiting passengers, plus the men's and women's restrooms. Other amenities include the usual ticketing desk, a lunchroom or cafe, which unfortunately was closed, vending machines, and baggage services. The station may have been renovated in the early 2000s, but that doesn't mean there still aren't bits and pieces of Southern Railway history dotted throughout. By far the coolest part of the station is just above the walkway out to the platforms, a map of Southern's railway network. This amazing map features all of Southern's rail lines, both passenger and freight routes. Greensboro is right at the heart of Southern's main line, with connections in all 4 of the cardinal directions. Just below and to the left of the map is yet another piece of Southern Railway history, Southern Railway's Departure Board, or as it's written, Schedule Bulletin. The board includes the Southern Crescent service between New York City and New Orleans, which Amtrak took over and continues to run to this day. Just below that, though, is another service that has since been painted over, the Piedmont. Although a Piedmont service still runs today, Southern's Piedmont was a bit different, operating between Washington, D.C. and Charlotte instead of the shorter Raleigh to Charlotte line. Just inside the hallway out to the tracks, passengers will find 2 disused rooms from the days of the Southern Railroad. The first of these is a baggage and parcel check, a service still provided by Amtrak, but the second is a barber shop. My guess is it hasn't been used since the station renovation, but it's still a nice touch that they kept it here. Heading over to the Quick Track kiosk, we can pick up our tickets for this ride out to Raleigh. These kiosks can be found at stations all over the US and can be used to purchase tickets, check reservations, and make adjustments to upcoming travel. I purchased my tickets ahead of time, so I'll be using it to print out our travel documents. A look at the departure board shows that our train, Amtrak Piedmont number 74, is still good for an on-time departure, and with that time fast approaching, we can head down the tunnel and up to platform 2. Before our eastbound train comes through, the westbound Piedmont 75 must make its stop. We don't have to wait long before a set of headlights appear about a mile down the tracks, arriving on track 1 right on time. Train 75 is led by F59PH number 1869, named after the city of Durham. The Piedmont is the only Amtrak service to operate the F59PH, and they're not even owned by Amtrak. Ownership instead belongs to the North Carolina Department of Transportation, or NCDOT. Train 75 finishes up its stop, and the 2 F59PH locomotives power up, hauling the train out of Greensboro and on towards Charlotte. Just north of the platform are the remnants of an old freight yard. Presumably a part of Southern's rail network back in the day, the yard has clearly not been used in many decades. The only remaining piece of equipment is this small maintenance vehicle. It's a short wait in between trains here, and soon enough train 74 comes into view. Our train today is led by F59PHI locomotive number 1755, the Piedmont's only other type of locomotive. Our train comes to a stop, a member of staff scans our ticket, and we can climb aboard. Finding an empty row, we can get seated for our ride over to Raleigh. Boarding concludes and our train powers out of Greensboro for this 1 hour and 40-minute ride on the Piedmont. Our driver doesn't let off the throttle even a little as we leave Greensboro behind, bringing us up to 79 miles per hour just 3 minutes after departure. Before we get too far from Greensboro, let's take a look at our route across North Carolina. Our journey begins heading east out of Greensboro, picking up speed through McLeansville and Gibbonsville before our first stop in Burlington. The tracks continue east, this time following US Route 70 to Hillsboro, with our second stop in Durham coming soon thereafter. Past Durham, our train heads south past Bethesda and Clegg ahead of our third intermediate stop in Cary, North Carolina. It's a quick ride between Cary and Raleigh, with US Route 54 guiding us into Raleigh Union Station. We'll cover a total of 81 miles between Greensboro and Raleigh today, with a travel time of 1 hour and 38 minutes. Seating on the Piedmont is very similar to the rest of Amtrak's fleet. The only service class may be coach, but the seats are definitely closer to what you would find in business class on Amtrak intercity trains. There's a solid 9 to 10 inches between my knees and the seat in front, way more than you would get in a regular coach seat, plus plenty of space beneath the next seat to stretch out. These coach seats also include the footrest usually reserved for business class or long-distance trains. The seat back pocket is quite short though, with only enough room for the train schedule and maybe some smaller personal belongings. The safety information card is much larger than the usual Amtrak pamphlet. What's interesting though is that this card can only be used for the 66-seat coaches like the one that we're in at the moment. We'll have a look at the other variant of these North Carolina coaches a bit later, but for now we'll finish up our tour of these seats. The tray table folds down from the seat back, translating back and forth easily. It's a little on the smaller side, but it gets the job done. Above the seats in each row are 2 lights activated by the buttons in between. These lights can be moved, but they're quite stiff. Each row also includes the usual set of outlets just below the window. Each seat can be adjusted using the lever on each armrest. The seat backs recline around 15 to 20 degrees from their upright position, which is more than enough to get comfortable on this mid-range intercity train. Blinds can be found along the windows of each row and can be buttoned up so that they stay out of the way, like seen here. Luggage racks are located above either side of the train and are deep enough to hold most medium to large suitcases. The interiors of the Piedmont coaches are relatively similar to the rest of Amtrak's intercity fleet, but do have some distinct differences over Amtrak's usual coaches. The interiors follow the same 2x2 seating arrangement with very similar seats and the same upper luggage racks and lights from Amtrak Horizon coaches. The colors and windows are what give away that these aren't regular Amtrak coaches. The windows are much taller than Amfleet or Horizon windows and let in a lot more natural light. Plus, with more headroom between the top of the seats and the bottom of the racks, the whole coach feels much more spacious. The interiors have been finished in a dull green or teal, which runs from the curtains to the seats and onto the floor. In combination with the purple fabric on the luggage racks and the end walls, the interiors feel a little strange, but it's a nice change from the typical Amtrak gray. By far the most distinct interior feature is found at one end of each car. In a separated section just before the vestibule, passengers can find 2 tables like one would find in the lounge car. The tables are separated by a glass partition, and as a nice touch, each partition features the crest of North Carolina. The other thing about the interiors and these coaches in general is just how loud they are. Maybe it was just my coach, but it honestly sounded like someone had left the door open before we set off. Wi-Fi is advertised throughout each coach as an amenity to all passengers. Heading into the settings on my phone, I tried to connect to the network, but despite my best efforts, it wouldn't let me online. Clearly the network was there, it just wasn't letting my phone access it. Very strange. Burlington is our first stop en route to Raleigh this afternoon. The station stop is fairly uneventful, but we can catch a glimpse at a historic Norfolk and Western caboose across Webb Avenue with the downtown Burlington Depot just to the right. We loaded up a few passengers and soon carried on. With our journey now well underway, we can get up to take a walk through the train. First things first, we'll head forward, where at the end of the first car, we find our lead F59PHI powering away. There unfortunately isn't much to see, but there is plenty to hear as our driver wails away on the Nathan K5LA horn. NCDOT is one of 2 remaining Amtrak operators of the F59PHI, the other being Caltrans. The rest of the F59PHI fleet has been phased out in favor of the Siemens SC44 Charger, with the retired locomotives being sold to Metra in 2018. Turning back around, we can make our way all the way to the rear of the train to find the lounge car. Instead of operating a normal cafe car, the Piedmont opts for a vastly different approach. The lounge car feels more like an American diner than a cafe car, with vinyl upholstery and smaller tables. The seats themselves are fairly comfortable, and each table includes 2 sets of outlets, plus an opaque blind that lowers from the ceiling above. Snack and drink options are found in the center of the car. Unlike all other Amtrak services, the Piedmont offers snacks and drinks through a set of vending machines, all of which were priced quite cheap. Cans of soda, which would normally cost $2.75, are only $1, and most snacks are only a little bit above that. The Piedmont also includes complimentary coffee and bottled water to all passengers, which is awesome. The coffee isn't great, but it is free, and the complimentary water was cold and refreshing. What's cool about the lounge car, and really the entirety of the North Carolina rail fleet, is that each car is named after a significant natural landscape feature or state symbol. The lounge car on our train is named after the Bogue Sound, one of the many parts of the intercoastal waterways around North Carolina. All of NCDOT's lounge cars are named after waterways, with the regular coaches taking on the names of other features of North Carolina. While we relax in the lounge car, let's take a look at some stats about our train and the route. Our train today is Amtrak Piedmont service number 74 and is powered by EMD F59PH locomotive number 1755 at the front, with F59PH number 1871 bringing up the rear. Our F59PH, named after the town of Cary, is powered by one of EMD's 710 V12 engines, producing 3,000 horsepower and is rated for a top speed of 84 miles per hour. Our F59PHI is named after the city of Salisbury and is powered by a very similar EMD 710 V12 that has been tuned to produce 3,200 horsepower. With its updated engine and gearing, the F59PHI is rated for a top speed of 110 miles per hour, although it won't ever see that as track speeds limit trains to 79 miles an hour. The Piedmont service runs a total of 173 miles across central North Carolina, serving 9 intermediate stops plus its 2 termini in Charlotte and Raleigh. Journey times from end to end average in at 3 hours and 10 minutes, which equates to an average speed of 54.6 miles an hour. It may not strictly be faster than driving, but it's certainly cheaper and much more comfortable. The coach in front of ours is coach 400,011, named Granite. Granite is one of the 56-seat coaches named 4 many zeros 8 through 14, as is mentioned on the slightly different safety information card. At a glance, these coaches are virtually indistinguishable from their 66-seat counterparts, but some passengers may notice the key difference between the two types. The 56-seat coaches have significantly more legroom. This increased seat pitch effectively gives this single-class train a fake business class. For those who travel more frequently on Amtrak, think of the difference in seating like comparing Northeast Regional coach seats to long-distance coach seats. It's a world of difference. Taking a seat, we see the real difference this space makes. Sitting here, I have an almost infinite amount of legroom. The next row of seats is about 1.5 feet from my knees, and there's more than enough space to stretch out and still have some bags beneath the next seat. With this extra space, the footrest actually becomes usable for taller passengers. Outside of the extra legroom, the at-seat amenities are pretty much identical to the other coaches. The tray table functions the same, although its track hasn't been extended, so it doesn't fully span the increased gap between rows. Passengers do get 2 sets of outlets here, which is pretty nice, plus 2 LED lights above each row. Really, the draw of these coaches is that extra legroom, and oh boy does it make a difference. If you're ever given the option to choose your coach, then I highly recommend going for one with a higher number. Bathrooms on board the Piedmont are pretty standard Amtrak facilities. The sink works well with plenty of soap, paper towels, antiseptic wipes, and toilet paper. The standard 120-volt outlet is in a rather inconvenient position on the wall opposite the vanity, but it does appear to be in good working order. The bathroom is quite clean and overall is in good condition, so well done to NCDOT for maintaining these facilities. The cruise through North Carolina is fairly uneventful. The sky unfortunately has taken on an overcast gray, but the trees have begun to sprout their leaves as spring approaches, bringing a bit of color to an otherwise dull landscape. Now, something that other trip reports seem to miss about these coaches is their incredible history, so it's time for a quick history lesson. Now I know what you're saying, what? A history lesson? But just bear with me. Unlike most of Amtrak's fleet, these coaches are entirely unique to the Piedmont. These coaches are technically owned by NCDOT, but I'll refer to NCDOT and Amtrak as the collective Amtrak entity when going through their history. Built by Pullman Standard and the St. Louis Car Company in the 1960s, these coaches changed hands multiple times before ending up with Amtrak. Our coach, named Dogwood, was built in 1965 by Pullman Standard and was owned by Kansas City Southern, the Chicago and Northwestern Railway, and New Jersey Transit before it was bought by Amtrak. For a while, it was planned that circus cars would run on the Piedmont. In 2017, Amtrak purchased 9 former circus train coaches from Barnum & Bailey to be refurbished and used on the Piedmont service. It was eventually decided that the coaches would not be refurbished and were listed for sale in 2020. Unfortunately, on March 10th of 2022, 4 of the coaches were damaged in a fire, while the remaining 5 were relisted for sale. The lounge cars have by far the coolest history behind them. The original coaches were actually built and used by the US Army in the 1950s. These cars were manufactured after the success of hospital trains throughout the Korean War, rushing wounded soldiers from the battlefield to hospital ships for better care. It is unclear if these coaches ever saw use in combat, lying in wait until 1973 when the cars were transferred to Amtrak. Our lounge car, the Bogue Sound, was first used as a Federal Railroad Administration inspection car and was later sold directly to NCDOT for the Piedmont. Right as we crossed the 1 hour and 30-minute mark, the arrival announcement was made for Raleigh Union Station, and only a few minutes later our train pulled up to the platforms at the end of the line. Grabbing our bag, we can make our way off the train and out into Raleigh, North Carolina. I always find it funny to see huge locomotives like the F59PH and PHI operating with single-level coaches, as they always tower over them by a solid 2 feet. Despite the height difference, the F59PHI is still a pretty locomotive, a fact helped in part by its very unique North Carolina livery. The livery takes direct inspiration from the flag of North Carolina, with a blue and silver mane paired with red and gold accents. The Star of North Carolina and NC are proudly displayed on the nose of each locomotive, with North Carolina painted down the side. It's honestly a really pretty livery, and I wish more routes had custom liveries like this one. The rain started to pick up while we were waiting out on the platforms, so we'll head inside Raleigh Union Station. This station is the second to serve Raleigh and was opened in 2018, so it's still relatively new. It's a beautiful modern station and we'll go over it in more detail in a later video, but for now, it's time to bring today's video to a close. Next week, we'll be back in Chicago for a ride on Metra's Electric Corridor, one of only a handful of overhead electrified rail lines in the United States. If you're new around here, then why not hit that subscribe button? It's totally free and it really helps support the channel. And hit that bell icon while you're down there to be notified whenever a new video goes live. As always, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to my patrons and channel members. Making videos takes a huge effort and I wouldn't be able to do it without your support. If you too want your name in the video or just want to support the channel in more ways than one, then head on over to the links in the description below. But anyways, that's all I have for today. Thanks for riding with me, and I'll see you in the next one.